Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, pimps and players, what it do, what it do. We are coming to you live from the 352, and today's podcast is brought to you by The Winking Owl, making all of your romantic dreams into realities. Taylor Shrum, it is good to be with you in person, my friend.
It's certainly great to be with you, Matt. This vintage particularly brings a certain odor that may protract, evoke a sort... No.
Damn it. We're getting a phone call, people.
Hello? Hey, I'm recording right now.
I believe this is Taylor's mother.
Yeah, what's up?
For all you guys out there and girls as well,
it's gonna be like an hour.
When your mom calls, always answer the phone. Even if you're in the middle of a podcast like this, you always got a homie like me, Matthew Freena, aka Matty Ice, that's willing to fill in, chew up some time, keep the audience entertained while Taylor handles his business.
Okay, I don't smoke spice.
If you got,
I don't know anybody who smokes spice.
Into a real intense conversation about spice.
All right,
Taylor doesn't smoke it. I don't smoke it. Taylor, what was that conversation about?
This is not at all planned, but my mom loves me quite a bit, and periodically she'll call me to let me know about different public health hazards, right? And in this instance, she's concerned about the hazards of spice, synthetic marijuana.
Oh.
And this is a very legitimate concern, right?
It is.
It's bad stuff.
It'll get you. That spice, you gotta watch out for it.
The worst symptom that I've heard of, and we won't linger on this topic, but since my mom brought it up,
conveniently interrupted this podcast.
Right. The worst symptom that I've heard of was some kid smoked it and was convinced that he was underwater. Like he thought, because everything he heard sounded like it was underwater. So I couldn't imagine that. People have died. People have OD'd. It's not a good thing by any means. What it is in really, really poor countries, they will just hire chemists, and by they I mean drug traffickers. They'll hire chemists to come up with a concoction of just random chemicals that will induce some sort of euphoric high, and we try to ban it in the United States. The cops try to, as soon as it gets here, they identify the molecule and they make it illegal. But then all it has to happen is just you alter the molecule by one carbon atom, one, whatever, and then it's a different molecule and it's now not contraband anymore. So it's this big thing, and it's not going to go away. Ultimately, there's an infinite amount of molecular combinations, and I'm not going to pretend to know too much about that. But thanks, Mom. So today we are talking about something completely different, which is better. Today we're talking about a headline that really struck me. And I wanted to kind of fill some folks in on what my thoughts were on that. And I'm going to be talking to Matt about it specifically.
When he says folks, he's referring to all of the ignorant Americans out there, like myself, who are just totally oblivious to what goes on in the news and Twitter. And honestly, that's why I have a friend like Taylor, because whenever we hang out together, it is just the facts with Taylor Shrum.
Just the facts.
Just the facts, nothing else.
Brought to you by Table Wine. So,
fill me in, dude. Tell me more about this.
I was thinking that I was going to have the disclaimer, I don't listen to that much news, and I don't consume that much media, but that's a lie. I consume quite a bit of media. I think ultimately the reason why this headline struck me so much is because I'm kind of into conspiracy theories, but at the same time I'm a huge skeptic of them. Sounds nice.
Sounds very nice.
So I'm kind of not into conspiracy theories, but I'm inclined sometimes to entertain ideas of coincidence that may have more meaning behind them. You could say that. So today is the 31st of May, 2017, and most notably, Donald Trump tweeted a tweet that said something along the lines of, despite harsh media coverage, but instead of coverage, he typed out this word that was nonsensical. It was like CONEFEFE. And it doesn't mean anything most likely it was just a typo of the word coverage, and then he didn't finish the sentence and tweeted it out. And for hours it was on Twitter.
He doesn't have someone proofreading his tweets?
And it scared the crap out of me when I heard later on tonight, and this happened yesterday at midnight, later on tonight, the next day, 31st, there's a press conference with Sean Spicer, one of the folks in the whole team Trump, and he was being interviewed. This was a press release, so it wasn't like a direct interview, but he was being asked, what does the tweet mean? Like, why was it left on so long? Should the public be concerned?
Is Donald Trump getting faded, dude, and just like drunk tweeting? I mean, it happens to the best of us people, but he is the president of the United States.
Come on.
That's some bad PR.
It would be ridiculous if he was. It would really be ridiculous if he was. I think that it wouldn't be out of the question for him to do something like that, though. Regardless of the fact that it was most likely an error. Most likely just the consequence of a night of inebriation, similar to this one.
We're giving Donald Trump the benefit of the doubt.
The benefit of the doubt.
We're good Americans. We don't criticize.
Yeah, this is not an episode of Trump bashing. This is an episode of Trump
interpretation.
Exactly.
Behavioral interpretation.
Exactly.
With Taylor and Matt. It doesn't get much better than this, people.
This is an episode of many names, many titles. The hardest part is figuring out which one to go with. So tracking with this story, crazy Trump tweets a tweet, and it's incoherent, but a lot of people on Twitter are legitimately concerned that this is some coded message, and so the media asks one of his press secretaries, what is the deal? What is going on? What did this mean? And Sean Spicer at first is like, it doesn't mean anything, don't worry about it. But then another person asks, and then he says, we know exactly what it means. A very small group of people know exactly what it means. And to me, that's like, okay, well, clearly there's something here. It's not just an error. So I'm not going to read into that too much. But
who was the person that said that?
Sean Spicer.
He said that there's a small group of people that knows exactly what it means.
I can play this for you right now.
Because that sounds like there's some guy with a black hoodie on standing in the back of the room. He steps forward when everything gets quiet, takes off his hood, and then reveals that he's the head of the Illuminati.
Exactly.
That sounds like what's about to go down.
It's crazy stuff.
We've got the audio coming in. Maybe not. This is a perfect moment to go use the bathroom or to pour up another glass of the Winking Owl. I don't know if I mentioned this before, but you can get this at Aldi. Okay, here we go. We got the audio
about
file.
How to pronounce it. The BBC has a dedicated pronunciation unit which declined to issue a definitive ruling on a made-up word, but was happy with the version we've gone with. So what does it mean? Google Translate suggests it's Samoan, but can't actually offer an English suggestion. Mr. Trump himself was not keen to clarify. The tweet that began it all has now been deleted, and his last on the subject simply reads,
"Who can figure out the true meaning of covfefe? Enjoy!"
That report from the newsroom's Jackie Leonard. And that wasn't the end of the story. The White House briefing a few hours ago, journalists asked Donald Trump spokesman Sean Spicer about the tweet.
Do you think people should be concerned that the president posted somewhat of an incoherent tweet last night and that it then stayed up for hours?
No.
Why did it stay up so long? Is no one watching this?
No, I think the president and a small group of people know exactly what he meant.
Talk about adding fuel to the fire.
Right? So, there's a million different things you could say about this. I personally think it was an error in the tradition of the Trump administration. It's just any publicity is good publicity. So we're going to make a bigger deal out of it than it needs to be. Now, that's not to say that there's millions of conspiracy theories that couldn't be interesting to think about as it relates to this new phenomenon. So, to back up, this is the cover story for May the 31st of 2017. But I would say a bigger story from this week is when Donald Trump went to the Vatican right? He gave the Pope 2 gifts. One was a very strange and gaudy plant-looking thing, porcelain, whatever.
Was it like actual vegetation, or was it like a pot?
No, it was like made out of like clay or pottery or something.
Did he make it himself? Is Donald Trump into pottery? The story just keeps getting deeper.
One of my buddies was like, it looks like Donald went to the nearest Trump Tower and just pulled like the first like random art like that was in the hotel or whatever.
Just took it right out of the lobby.
This is mine. This is huge enough for the Pope. Should be good. And so he gave him that. But more interestingly, and this is what I want to dive into tonight, is he gave the Pope some literature from Martin Luther King. Now, this is interesting on a couple of different levels. Donald Trump is not an outspoken fan of literature in the first place, of anything other than making money, in my opinion, and winning, right? He is a winner and he is a wealthy individual. His intellectual depth is limited. His scope of...
How do you know, though, that he doesn't like reading?
No, so I don't. We don't know much about him, really.
What if he's like a huge closet Martin Luther King Jr. fan?
Yeah, you never know.
It's possible, folks.
It's possible. He's an American. Martin Luther King is a big American figure. Keystone, a cornerstone of American culture. Civil rights. I look up to him quite a bit.
I Have a Dream. Right. One of the most iconic speeches of all time.
And it really wouldn't be that outlandish. It wouldn't be uncharacteristic to give this type of thing as a gift, perhaps.
But the thing that's kind of outlandish about it is that it's the Pope, which is like the biggest religious figure in the world, or one of the biggest.
Right.
And so you think that he would provide him with maybe some sort of religious token or text, not so much. I mean, Martin Luther King Jr. was a reverend, so I guess there is some sort of religious connection there.
Yeah.
But as you pointed out earlier, he's best known for his involvement with the civil rights movement, and so that's kind of like an unexpected message.
Yeah. And in exchange, the Pope gave Donald Trump the
middle finger. That's what he gave him. Just shot him a quick bird.
He gave him his essays on climate change. So the Pope has written essays on climate change. They have a specific Catholic title, but his benedictions, whatever you want to say about climate change. He's a big proponent for the reduction of greenhouse gases, materialism in general. He sees capitalism as something perhaps to be dampened down. We could talk about capitalism versus collectivism till the cows come home. But essentially, my main interest in this event, this world event, is as follows. Martin Luther King is an important figure in history. To religion, to civil rights, to politics, certainly his name will go down in history and be remembered until the apocalypse. But
it's coming, people. Get ready.
Someone more notable, perhaps. More notable, less notable. I'm not really trying to comment on that tonight. But someone as notable, if not more, historically, is someone by the same name. Martin Luther. And this was a figure from the 1500s. From the 16th century, he was responsible for single-handedly writing a thesis that led to the toppling of the public's view of Catholicism. Now, to put a little bit more context into this, basically, in the 1500s, the Catholic Church was so intertwined with the government that they had ultimate power. You had the kings of...
There was no separation of church and state.
Correct. And basically that led to a lot of corruption. That led to a lot of bad outcomes. Most notably, the sale of indulgences. Indulgences were basically things that the Catholic Church, pieces of paper the Catholic Church sold to people in exchange for supposedly getting their loved ones out of purgatory, which purgatory is, for all intents and purposes, hell to some extent.
It's like this kind of intermediary between heaven and hell.
Right.
And you don't want to be stuck in purgatory. You obviously want to get in heaven.
Right.
So the Catholic Church was basically taking advantage of the public's ignorance because most people at that time couldn't read the Bible, and therefore they couldn't interpret the gospel. And so Martin Luther, yeah, that's his name. I don't want to confuse it. But Martin Luther, he was very well educated. He was in the priesthood. And so he basically came along, he read through all the scriptures for himself, and he basically figured out, everything that the Catholic Church is preaching right now doesn't really seem to lie parallel to the biblical text that I've been studying. And that's what generated the 95 Theses.
Correct, 100%. And this isn't a history lesson by any means. It's a very valuable chunk of history that we're bringing up to make a bigger point. But
it's context. We're contextualizing things.
But if you think about the significance of what Martin Luther, not Martin Luther King, did in the 1500s, it was huge. It was about the equivalent of
Steve Jobs revolutionizing the personal computer, cell phones, the whole 9 yards.
That's a great comparison. The invention of the iPhone.
Yeah.
It was something that literally got people less ignorant. It let people be able to access information much quicker, very crucial and vital information. In the 1500s, this vital information was the Bible. Nowadays, I would still make the argument that the Bible is probably some of the most crucial information you can have. But to make it equivalent to the iPhone would be a fair equivocation. So, moving forward from that, the Catholic Church gets a lot of... Moving forward from that, the Catholic Church faces a lot of scrutiny and faces a lot of backlash because what Martin Luther is saying in his 95 Theses, which, by the way, the Pope this year visited the church that the 95 Theses was tacked onto. Just an interesting little tangential fast fact, but the 95 Theses questioned, like you said so eloquently, the practices of the Catholic Church in that time. So why am I bringing all this up? Why is all this significant to Donald Trump giving the gift of literature from Martin Luther King to the Pope today? Well, I think that you can all see kind of the correlation, the coincidence, as it were. Right, so on the surface, Donald Trump, a very outspoken, bombastic, some would say crazy politician, kind of Cinderella story, rise to power, probably shouldn't be there, who's to say, gives this gift to the Pope, right? Someone who just has unquestionable authority and legitimacy, like the Queen.
He's the Pope.
He's the Pope.
Yeah. He gets to wipe his ass with $100 bills. He's balling on that level, it's safe to say.
He's got things figured out for him on a whole nother level, to say the least. Now, to give any gift to someone like this is a huge statement. Whatever you give him is a huge statement. If someone from Spain was to give him a soccer ball that had the insignia of Barcelona's football team, this would be of significance because this could possibly be interpreted as the prediction of who's going to win the La Liga football tournament, right? This could be this is an omen. It's a sign. Anything that touches the Pope is significant. That's why I'm taking the liberty of interpreting this event to mean something more than just Martin Luther King was a good guy, let's celebrate him. He was a good guy. We're not in this podcast talking down to Martin Luther King at all. He was way better than any of us could ever dream of being in his timing and in his passion for civil rights. Okay? But the fact that he shares the name with one of the most significant anti-Catholic individuals in history to me, is a symbol of something bigger. And whether it's as small as Donald Trump kind of hinting at his Protestantism and his anti-Catholic Catholic sentiment, that could be as innocent as it is. But it could be a lot more. And I don't think I need to play into that too much. But
well, let's rewind for a quick second,
right.
Because a statement that you just made was really interesting. How you feel as if Martin Luther King Jr. is kind of on this like spiritual level, and in society and in relationships too, we often make the mistake of putting different people on pedestals, and a lot of the times it's rightly deserved. As Taylor pointed out, Martin Luther King Jr. did amazing things for America, and he will certainly go down in history as one of America's most iconic figures. But at the end of the day, he's just a human being like the rest of us. And while it's easy to become extremely impressed with what he did, I don't necessarily believe in putting people on pedestals and thinking of them as being above us, because they're ultimately not. And it's also unfair to them to some extent, because you put a tremendous amount of pressure. And so Taylor and I both agree that Martin Luther King Jr. is an amazing person, but at the same time, it's important to have a healthy level of respect, not just for the amazing things that he accomplished, but also for his humanity. And I think that's important to point out for a lot of our listeners, because that's something that can often be confused.
Right. And I think that America is kind of in the state that it's in because we have put so many people on pedestals, and that's what people do.
We do it with celebrities all the time.
Yeah.
We say, hey, you're this really special individual, you're above the societal as well as political rules and regulations, and therefore you can get away with certain things. Tiger Woods just got pulled over for a DUI the other day, and I'm sure in his brain before he got into that vehicle, and this is obviously a big assumption, I don't know Tiger Woods personally, I don't know what was going through his head, but I think it's reasonable enough to assume that he thought because of his place in American society, he would be above any sort of police involvement. Mm-hmm. And yet that certainly wasn't the case. And that's why when we build people up in our minds, and then that's reflected in the way that we treat them, it gives them a certain level of just kind of hubris that ultimately becomes their downfall. Mm-hmm. And that's why, as much as it's important to celebrate people's accomplishments, it's also important to kind of remind ourselves of people's humanity, because none of us are above it all. None of us are God. That's right. We all have our imperfections.
Yeah. And the Pope is a great example of someone who is put on the pedestal by society in what would seem like a constructive way, right? The Pope symbolizes all that is good in the world to some extent. He symbolizes someone who, in the esteem of his fellow man, who his fellow man are the holiest men in the world, they have elected him to become their leader. And for whatever you think about the Catholic Church, it has a very colorful history. This position, to very many people, is a position of esteem, a position of holiness. And what that means to a religious person, it might be different from what it means to someone who doesn't associate with a religion per se. But it is a significant position. And so the extent to which he has been put on a pedestal may be a little bit more justified. The extent to which Donald Trump has been put on a pedestal is potentially justified by a relatively archaic political structure.
What process do you have to go through to become the Pope?
That's something I don't really know much about. But
what's the level of accountability in place?
I'm definitely not an authority on the papacy ascent, but essentially I know that this Pope was a Jesuit Pope from Argentina. He's the first Pope not from Europe, so that's interesting.
That's a big deal.
He's the first Jesuit Pope, which is a big deal because the Jesuits have been one of the most successful sects of Catholicism in terms of evangelism, as well as there are more celestial bodies and more indents and aspects of the moon that are named after Jesuits than any other group of people. The Jesuits have been busy, folks. They've been doing things, and now they got their boy up at the top. So
0 to 100 real quick,
in a swift fashion, one would say. And I think it's the Philippines or one of the South Pacific island countries is majority Jesuit, and then Indonesia is majority Islamic. So it's very interesting.
What is Jesuit exactly?
So Jesuitism is kind of like a sect of Catholicism, and I learned recently that sects of Catholicism don't actually split up on Sundays when they gather. They all come under one roof that is a Catholic roof.
Because like with Christianity, like the Baptists get together, the non-denominationals get together, the what are the people that like yell and scream and throw hymnals at each other?
Pentecostals.
The Pentecostals.
Right,
that was a very politically incorrect thing to say. Nothing against Pentecostals. I've never met a Pentecostal that I haven't liked, but
and in many ways, all of these terms can be used to describe Christians in general. The words themselves just come from a historical background that ultimately defines the nature of Protestantism.
Yeah.
Like, there's no sect that isn't Christian, right? Anyway, so going back to, you raise a good point about the sects of Christianity, because what's interesting is that the Lutherans are a sect of Christianity. The Lutherans are a continuation of that figure that we talked about earlier, Martin Luther, from the 15th century. Not the 15th century, Martin Luther from the 16th century.
Close enough. One of the centuries.
One of them, right? He was a figure that spurned an entire
movement.
Following. Right, exactly. That still lives on in a very strong fashion to this day.
And Taylor and I are symbolic of that. Well, I can't speak for Taylor, but I myself consider myself a Protestant. And with Martin Luther, it all started with the Protestant Reformation.
Right, that's right. You may have heard these terms Protestant and Catholic used to describe the history of Ireland, Northern Ireland, and England in the UK. I don't remember what years, but there was a lot of tumult, a lot of conflict in this region as a result of some sectarian divides. In simpler terms, there were people who were Protestant and people who were Catholic that did not like each other because of those affiliations, and they fought each other in very bloody battles, very bloody. And a lot of that sentiment was brought into the New World, into the United States, as immigration to that new continent took place. And so for Donald Trump to bring literature from America that is written by a Protestant, right? Martin Luther is very much a Protestant, Baptist, but then also shares the name of the person who led the charge against Catholicism at a point where it was very useful to do so, very needed to do so. To present that to the Pope is not, I wouldn't say it's a smack in the face. It's not that strong, but it's noteworthy. It's something that is not going to pass over the heads of many ministers and many people who are knowledgeable about religious things.
Well, that's the thing. At the very most, Donald Trump is giving the Pope a middle finger. At the very least, it's something that's compelling enough for Taylor and I to talk about. And Taylor and I would like to consider ourselves smart people.
Street philosophers.
Yeah.
Street philosophers.
And so we don't like to waste our time with all of the nonsense and bullshit that characterizes most of American culture. And so by us really sitting down and talking about this, it is noteworthy, at least to some extent. And so for you guys, I mean, definitely take some time. Look up the tweets. Look up the stuff that's posted on Newsweek and on CNN, because there's a ton of other people out there besides us that are analyzing this behavioral pattern. And so you can get other opinions other insights. We are just the tip of the iceberg.
That's right. And I would even amend your previous statement to say the worst he did was give the Pope a middle finger, right? That could potentially lead to some conflict. If nothing else, lead to some internal conflict between the organization that is the United States of America and the established institution of the Vatican Church. That's the worst case scenario. The least case scenario is that Trump was just ignorant of the fact that this was even a possible interpretation of gift giving.
Which certainly is possible.
Which certainly is not out of the realm of possibility. Okay, if I was a president and I was given the opportunity to give a gift to the Pope, I would give him something that is neutral. I would give him something that he would actually appreciate.
I would just make an impulse buy.
Not to say that the writings of Martin Luther King is not something that the Pope can appreciate. The Pope is definitely, especially this Pope, is a champion of civil rights to some extent. Certainly more than his predecessors. But just the fact still remains, this dude has the same name as Martin Luther.
It's just so strange. It's so unexpected.
Why?
Like, here's the thing, Donald Trump. You're about to give a gift to the Pope. And maybe there's something that Donald Trump knows that we don't. And right now, Taylor and I are just making asses out of ourselves by trying to analyze everything that's going on with regards to this situation. But to us, like the average American, and I'm sure a lot of you guys that are watching this consider yourselves average Americans, it just seems so uncanny. And I think that's why so many people are just confused by Donald Trump, because so many of the things that he does are just so outlandish. But at the same time, all of his outlandish behavior has put him in the position of power that he holds today. And so maybe there really is a method to his madness.
Mm-hmm. And maybe it's these type of conversations that got him elected in the first place.
Yeah.
And we're just perpetuating this.
It's free publicity for Donald Trump.
Yeah.
He's not paying us to do this.
Yeah. Nobody's paying us to do this.
I know. We are just doing this absolutely for free.
Except for
the winking owl.
The winking owl is some of the most premier wine that will ever touch human lips. And by premier, I mean a variety of things. But essentially, it's great wine, right? I'm not going to whine about it.
Wine sellers, we love to complain.
Right.
That's what we are. We're a couple of wine sellers.
That's right.
That's Taylor and I's main motivation, is we're really trying to get into the wine trade, and so we're subliminally, that's a hard word to pronounce.
It is.
Advertising all these different wines. That way someone will catch wind of us and hire us to co-produce commercials for wine.
That's right.
Because I want to move to California, sample wine, and make commercials. That, folks, is living the dream.
It's living the dream, and the winking owl is really symbolic of something much more than just one of our favorite furry creatures. You know,
with great eyesight. Don't owls have great eyesight?
They have exceptional eyesight, and that is one of the motifs of ancient mysticism, is that birds have better eyesight than humans.
Really?
They're some of the only animals that have that, and in ancient mysticism, the eye represents seeing. The top of the pyramid on the back of the dollar bill,
the all-seeing eye.
The eye is very significant in these ancient stories. The winking owl, I'm not going to talk anymore about it. At the end of the day, we understand a lot more than we give ourselves credit for, right? These conspiracies, or so they're called, they go really deep sometimes, like the 9/11, all that kind of stuff. It's just like, even if any of it's true, I don't have any.
Did the Holocaust really happen?
Yeah, that's not...
People actually... No, but I'm serious. People actually argue about that, which is so disrespectful because, let's be honest, people, the Holocaust really did happen. Mm-hmm. And for someone to say otherwise, regardless of how convincing their argument may be, is just absolutely ludicrous. It's like, do you realize the amount of human suffering that happened with that event, and you're just going to try to discredit it all?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the implications of a comment like that is immediate disqualification from 99% of the population of the world.
Yeah.
Right? It's like saying the earth is flat, which is very popular to say. It's very popular to get attention by saying a lot of things. In this podcast, we aren't going to claim anything for shock value. although today we are trying to perhaps unearth a rather coincidental and potentially conspiratorial phenomenon or event that happened.
Can we talk about something real quick? Shock value.
Yeah.
The fact that you just brought that up is really interesting because with the advent of social media and really the rise of social media, it's really allowed people to become celebrities a lot more easily because market controls demand, not so much these different like main players saying, okay, we'll let you in, we're not going to let you in. It's just like whatever the people want, the people get. Taylor, by the way, has some great wine pouring technique. And so a lot of people are able to do outrageous things for attention. It's like middle school all over again. That's what our society has turned into. And I'm not going to start naming names because that would be very inappropriate. But a guy that I used to go to high school with, he has started to post all these different pictures on Facebook and Instagram, where he is dressed up like a girl. And the thing that blows me away about the whole thing is that he gets like over 1,000 likes and over like 1,000 comments and shares and stuff, which I just find really, really interesting. I mean, if he wants to dress up like a girl and take pictures of himself, like I'm totally cool with that. Like I don't have a problem with that in the least bit. I'm all about self-expression. That's what Taylor and I are doing right now. We're just expressing ourselves, and in many ways it's very cathartic. But I just find it so interesting the amount of attention that he receives because of it, simply because it's so outlandish. Like Taylor and I, when we post this video, at the very best we'll probably get 250 or 300 views on YouTube. Meanwhile, this man is up in like the 100K. Like he's just killing it. And I just find that so interesting how now with social media, if we do things that are just really, really crazy, we can immediately receive, so much attention.
Yeah, but how productive, and this isn't taking away from the decision to dress up like a girl at all, right? There's some merit to that.
Yeah.
Not much, but there's some merit to that. How productive for society is that? I don't think that this conversation is that productive for society, but it's productive for the few people who are listening to it and seeing.
We're providing some level of intellectual stimulation.
Yeah, because tomorrow you can go talk to your friends about, hey, Martin Luther, the Pope, Donald Trump.
What the heck is going on?
What's going on? What's going on with the world? Go check out Taylor and Matt's podcast. Right now, we are naked. Under our clothes, we're not wearing anything else. And that's
nothing. Ladies, try not to get too excited.
Yeah, if you want to talk shock value, that's the reality of the situation, and nobody's, following us crazy. I think that ultimately, what we're doing here is productive. It's not unsustainable, right? It's not something that we're going to lose our integrity over.
But see, someone could also argue that what my friend from high school is doing is also productive because he is inspiring individuals to express themselves, and B, he's really highlighting some of the latest fashion trends. Because that's the thing, he posts like a different outfit with every picture that he does. And he is on the up and up when it comes to the most popular fashion trends. And so people that are really into clothing and makeup and stuff could find his pictures on Instagram extremely enlightening. So it just all depends on what your interests are. If you're really interested in politics or conspiracy theories, or two guys just hanging out drinking some winking owl, then our podcast is certainly the place to be. But if that's not your cup of tea, then you're obviously going to go somewhere else. And ultimately what it comes down to is entertainment. Right now, to some extent, we're entertaining you, and that's probably why you're still watching this. And my buddy from high school, he's doing the same thing. He's just entertaining people in a different way.
Yeah. And again, I'm not going to take anything away from him. I personally think that it's less productive to dress up and do anything than to have a conversation about real things. With that being said, I could be completely wrong, right? Dressing up And wearing something could be the biggest statement that there could be, right? The Pope, what does he wear? He doesn't wear just anything, right?
What's the official name for the Pope's outfit?
I have no idea.
What's the thing called that's on his head?
The hat.
The hat?
Yeah. It's the hat of...
Very descriptive.
No, I don't know. But Trump's wife, and I believe Trump's daughter, wore veils
Really?
to visit the Pope.
They were going hardcore?
This is another strange thing that I wasn't going to comment on this in this podcast, but to me, when I heard that, I was like, okay, when you wear veils and you wear all black, you're at a funeral.
Yeah.
Why would you wear that to go visit the Pope? My conclusion is either they think someone's dead, there's something dead about the Catholic thing, or something is dead, right? There's that symbolism.
Something died.
Something's dead.
The Pope's cat's dead, people. That's the real story here.
So there's either that, something is dead, whether it be symbolic, abstract, or actually dead. And that does mean something to some people. Just as that recording, this crazy tweet word meant something to a group of people. They're just that ignorant that they don't know what they're wearing to visit the Pope. I highly doubt it's that one, because they're not ignorant people, right? They're relatively... They know what they're doing. They got elected.
And here's the thing that most people don't realize. It's not just Donald Trump and his wife and his daughter. They have so many personal assistants that are incredibly intelligent people and are incredibly aware of what's going on in society, and that it advise all of their behavioral patterns. Mm-hmm. So it's not that's the thing. When Taylor and I get dressed in the morning, we just have our own intellect to guide us as far as what we think we should wear. Mm-hmm. Donald Trump and his whole crew, they have a whole just posse of people that tell them what to do and how to do it. And that's what most people forget. So there certainly has to be some sort of purpose behind this outfit that Ivanka, that's how you pronounce her name?
Ivanka, yeah.
And their daughter wore.
Maligna, whatever. So, and it's very strange to me. I would never dream of dressing my wife and my daughters in this type of garb to visit the Pope. I'm a more conventional person than Donald Trump. Going back to what I was originally saying, though, this friend of yours that dresses like a woman for shock value to get views, or maybe he's genuinely expressing himself, whatever it is.
It's probably a combination of both.
Yeah, whatever it is, it isn't. I previously said it was unproductive. It isn't unproductive because I don't know exactly what he's doing. He may be doing something that is extremely productive to society. I just don't see the value in it, right? Or I see very little value in it other than, ha ha ha, that's not traditionally what men wear, right? And that's silly. Yeah. That's a silly thing to do. Silly things are funny, and laughing is fun, right? That's value. But essentially, having a conversation is so much more valuable than anything else you can do. Because what are you doing? I would make the argument that the only things that truly exist in this world are minds. And when two minds are going at it, trying to get at the bottom of a situation, there's something there that can just keep attention in a way that there's just some kind of value there. And I think that's something to continue and something to strive after. So I'm really excited to see the feedback from this episode. I'm really excited to see. I think we'll probably put a link to your buddy's account, just out of irony.
Well, I don't know. That'd be kind of. Would that be inappropriate? I feel like that'd be kind of inappropriate because I said I wouldn't say his name, so if we put a link to his account, then that's really putting him on blast. Yeah, but that's the thing, we're not trying to put him on blast. It's merely just social commentary. Please don't confuse that. Whether it's the Pope, whether it's Donald Trump, whether it's Martin Luther King Jr., whether it's Martin Luther, or whether it's my buddy from high school. Taylor and I are lovers. We're not fighters. We're not here to criticize these different individuals from history or in modern day. We just find all these people's behavior extremely interesting, and that's why we're here talking about it. Mm-hmm. So if we offended anybody by anything that we said, We apologize profusely. That was certainly not our goal. Maybe the winking owl took a little bit of effect.
Yeah.
Not as much as it should. We're loving it. It's not really loving us back, at least in the way that I would hope. But that's just all part of the process.
Yeah.
But I wanted to point that out. We're just sitting here talking, kind of shooting the breeze and analyzing these different behavioral patterns. We're not here bashing anybody.
And we're having a good time. I couldn't have said it better myself, Matt. I think that we mean no harm. We're merely just having a conversation. Genuinely, that's what we're doing. And with that being said, we do apologize to anyone we have offended. That includes the Pope, Catholic Church, Donald Trump.
If you're watching this, Donald Trump, come visit us. We're a great time.
Any fashionistas, anybody who went to high school with Matthew Farina, anybody who attended high school within the years 2012 to 2018. We would apologize to who else?
I think we've about covered it, dude.
The family.
You can apologize to your girlfriend because you're not hanging out with her right now.
Yeah.
We're making this podcast. That's who's really hurting in this moment is Taylor's girlfriend.
It's the real MVP.
But hey, we give you a huge shout out, Taylor's girlfriend. We wish you were here. Good luck on your test tomorrow. You're gonna crush it.
Gonna crush it. So yeah. Ask us questions. Give us topics to talk about. Matt's gonna be going back up to North Florida, Jacksonville, and that is out of reach for us to do a podcast together. Oh, wait a second, it's definitely not, because you were in Dubai and we did podcasts together, so we'll figure it out. But he's going to be going back up there. I'm going to probably be doing some podcasts with my buddy Tyler when he gets back from Beijing. And Matt is going to be launching his own podcast.
With Trevor. Big T Rev. Trevor Baldwin.
Who was in the last episode of the Try Dubai series, which everybody who watched that, thank you so much. Thanks to Just Angie for helping us edit and produce a lot of that as well.
We're not ending this podcast until Taylor finishes that glass of wine.
And
so you better get to work, big dog.
I think we've got a few more apologies to make, too. We apologize to the Winking Owl for any product misrepresentation. The Winking Owl is in no way affiliated with this podcast or YouTube, unless previously stated. And it's in no way affiliated with Blue headphones or
Blue Yeti
or the Apple series. It's not affiliated with the Whirlpool Series 11 refrigerator.
We're just covering all our bases because we don't want some attorney coming and knocking on our door asking for $50,000 because we said something that we shouldn't have. Also, too, I'd like to point out, if you have seen us reach over to the keypad like this, it's because Taylor's screen keeps going on like shutdown mode or screensaver, whatever you want to call it, and so we have to turn it back on so we can see ourselves to make sure that there is a proper camera angle. Also, too, even though this is not an official advertisement for the Blue Yeti mic, and Taylor just said how we're not affiliated with them in the least bit, we did purchase a Blue Yeti mic, and along with this little microphone stand and shock mount and pop filter to make a smoother sound. And we really feel like it's going to enhance these podcasts simply because it enhances the audio quality. So we are really, really excited about these products, and we hope to keep on having some fun. Taylor's really struggling to finish this last glass of wine, but it's okay. Oh, he just did it. He gave in to peer pressure, folks. Don't follow that example. If someone is pressuring you to drink alcohol, the moral of the story is, don't do it.
Don't do it.
Only drink alcohol because you want to. Don't drink it to try to be cool. Don't drink it to try to fit in. And certainly don't drink it to try to appease the masses. Because at the end of the day, it's all about you. It's not about the rest of society.
That's right. And you better not be doing it to get more views on YouTube. Because we would never do that. We would never put a provocative product like alcohol.
The winking owl.
The winking owl is something that has meant a lot to us over the last few hours.
It's an owl that's winking. I mean, what is more provocative than that?
As its essence has echoed through time and space, I would argue, and others would too as well, it's meant more to many people than just a beverage to be consumed. It's a way of life if you're poor, right? This is some of the cheapest wine that is available in the market today. Not to say that it isn't of the utmost quality.
In the honor of full disclosure, we are being paid by the Winking Owl right now to do this.
Being paid in vibes.
They're writing us a fat check.
In positive energy.
Yes. Not in monetary value.
Not in monetary, but we don't seek the dollar in any way, shape, or form. I think at this point, it has become too difficult to mask our inebriation, and words are flowing out similar
Well,
to
hold on. Let's be honest here. There is a difference between getting a little tipsy off a bottle of wine and being fully inebriated. I don't want to confuse our audience. We're not like totally smashed right now. Like if we were totally smashed, I'd be freestyling. Like that's what would be going on right now. But Taylor and I certainly believe in using the winking owl as a little bit of social lubrication. And I think it really has promoted some healthy conversation this evening. So the winking owl has served its purpose. And at this point, Taylor does make a solid observation. We are rambling a little bit, so I think it's probably time to let you guys go. But this has been a ton of fun. We hope that it's been insightful. Definitely make sure that you comment below if you love us or you totally hate us. As Donald Trump has proven, any publicity is good publicity. So let us know what you think. And until next time, Matthew Freena, a.k.a. Matty Ice, and Taylor Shrum, a.k.a. T. Shroom, are signing off.